How long until the next AAA downgrade? Spain lost its top rating last week, and there's speculation even France may be around the corner. With me to discuss the threat of sovereign risk is Erik Chaney, chief economist at the Axa Group. He is in Paris this morning. Erik, glad you could be with us. How much of a risk is there right now in sovereign credit?
Good morning. Well, basically, what has happened over the last 2 years is that the excess of debt accumulated by the private sector and the financial sector has been transferred to governments. So logically, we should see a downgrade. We should see lower debt quality, which is exactly what the credit default swap markets is telling us. So this has already started. We saw that for a couple of countries in Europe. And on my list, there are much bigger economies where I see a risk of downgrade, starting with the UK, the US as well, France probably, among the large economies. We will see how the new Japanese government behaves regarding fiscal policy, but Japan is also on the radar's list.
Okay, Erik, France, the UK, the US, Japan, those are among the biggest industrialized economies in the world. When you say they're on your list, how long until we see credit rating agencies actually move to downgrade those credits?
Look, I think it's a relative game more than an absolute game. People used to think that, a AAA sovereign debt is risk-free, but actually it's not risk-free. And that is the lesson of this crisis. How can you say that the country is risk-free when the debt is more than 100% of GDP, or in the case of Japan, 200% of GDP? On a relative basis, I think that the rating agencies, but also the markets, are going to punish the countries where governments are slow to react in order to put their fiscal books in good order, but also to boost growth. And currently, my suspicion is that there is more focus on growth than on the fiscal adjustment. And that was one of the reasons why a rating agency downgraded Spain, because the growth prospects are indeed very poor in this country.
Erik, if a AAA rating doesn't mean as much as it used to, why pay attention to the rating agencies at all? Why not just focus on credit default swap spreads, for example?
I think that's a very good question, and personally I would focus on credit default swaps, on bond yields, but nevertheless, as I said, the relative position of countries is still very important, and there are people working, they are doing a good work. As far as sovereign credit is concerned, it's very different from CDOs in rating agencies. So even if people are aware that AAA doesn't mean what we thought it was, on a relative basis, if you see a downgrade of the UK or France, of course it will have huge consequences on bond yields, but also on the financial sector in these countries. This is why I think it still deserves the focus of the markets.
Erik, thanks for joining us. Some great perspective there on what a credit rating really means any longer. That is Erik Chaney, chief economist for the Axa Group in Paris.